we had a conversation about this actually early on in our podcast, but we've talked about how because WWE was so, that's what people had access to, and that trained generations of fans to think of people a certain way, particularly when it comes to women, women who look a certain way, who dress a certain way, that is something that has emboldened a lot of people to think that they can disrespect women. And we saw that play out. And again, this is not just a WWE thing, but it just in the form of wrestling. And something that Mel and I talk about a lot is wrestling reflects reality. And we got that this week. And so there was at Dynamite on Wednesday, or following Dynamite, they had ROH tapings, and Skye Blue had a match. And apparently there was a fan in the front row who was just saying extremely vulgar things to her, while also a child was present. The assumption is that it's his own child. Maybe
I have Dave's.
Maybe it's a family member of some sort. So there was a child present with these things, and so go ahead and do that. And I have it got to the point with whatever was being said that other fans tried to step in, and he continued. And then as soon as the match was over, Skye left extremely upset. And then Aubrey Edwards and Rachel Ellering, who I believe must have been her opponent, ran out of the ring. And from Rachel's own words, she tweeted and said, "The speed in which Ref Aubrey and I made it out of the ring last night post-match to get this creep kicked out was remarkable. Olympic medalist speeds. I have never in all caps in my career heard such vulgar things being said to a talent during a match. Sexual harassment is not heckling." And so, which has obviously been a topic as well, because a lot of people who probably felt called out by that decided that, well, he paid for his ticket, he can say whatever he wants. No, again, freedom of speech is not freedom of consequence.
Thank you. Louder for the people in the back.
It's not.
You can't. No, you got it all. You covered it all. You nailed it. That's exactly what happened. Even the quote, that she's straight up like, that's not okay.
Mm-mm.
And I mean, I'm glad that at least people reacted to it this time, where it was not okay, and people around this person were saying like, no. But the fact that it happened at all kind of perpetuates what we talk about a lot of the weeks here, where we're like, this is still happening.
It is. It is. And yeah, I was actually going to bring this up too. Laurent said Saraya pointed out the same fan on Dynamite. Yeah, that was who we all, because even when I was telling,
I think they all were aware of him. It sounds very much like, at one point you could, it said that at one point you could hear the guy making the remarks on the audio recording because of the quietness of the.
Yeah. And so, because Nikki and I talked, because even when we were watching Dynamite, Nikki pointed out that Saraya had turned around and was yelling at somebody, and she looked upset, like it didn't look like a friendly.
It was an ROH, like that actually happened during the ROH taping, but he had been. This says
so he had been doing stuff in Dynamite, which is why was he not thrown out during Dynamite? What was he? So I don't know if he felt emboldened, because he clearly, so during the match that Saraya was in, that match was Harley Cameron versus Mariah May, which both of those women, particularly Mariah May, gets a lot of things said at her because of how she looks. I mean, we've talked about Kevin Kelly has even said some things as far as, he's surprised that she can hit hard because she's pretty. So you have that kind of things coming as well. But so I don't know if what he was saying in Dynamite was annoying, like enough to get Saraya's attention, but not enough to get thrown out. And maybe did he feel emboldened, and that's why he said the things that he said? Or just security does not give a shit and they just didn't kick him out? Like, if he was a problem when Saraya was out there, why wasn't he kicked out then and there? Like, why did it get to the point where this happened in ROH during the ROH tapings after the show? So that's definitely something.
To the point where Rachel Ellering told him not to be such a pervert and to F off. That's how close Rachel Ellering got to him.
Okay, see, yeah, right. And so Yeah, and Nikki and I pointed this out too, that so Dynamite did start off with a guy on the opposite side of the ring pulling the woman's shirt and exposing her bra. That was literally 10 seconds into the broadcast because Nikki and I both saw it and we were like, what the fuck is this guy doing? But it was not that guy, because where Saraya was at was the opposite side of the ring. So it was, if the same guy that was yelling at Skye Blue is the one Saraya was yelling at, he was on the opposite side of the ring from the guy in the front row who exposed the woman's shirt, the woman's bra. Like literally, you know how camera pans at the audience at the very beginning of the show? He literally, as soon as the camera got to him, reached over, pulled over her shirt and exposed her bra.
And Dave even makes the point that they do an announcement, and I've been at their shows and this is true, but they make an announcement very explicit, like Justin Roberts or whoever is doing the ring announcements, about the fact that they won't tolerate this harassment, racism, sexual misconduct. Right. So to your point, like, why wasn't this guy, if he was already, when Saraya said something, there should have been action made. Because, and
then Brad says here that he read that the guy that Saraya pointed out is not the same guy. That guy that she pointed out settled down after that, and this guy incident was a completely different guy.
Wonderful.
So that could
be even worse.
That there are multiple men out there doing
wonderful. This. There's two dudes in there. There's two perverts at the show.
Or maybe three. Maybe it's a third one. Maybe it's the guy who revealed the woman's bra, the one Saraya talked to, and maybe the Skye Blue person was neither one of these men. So they need
to make examples of these people so that people understand that they're not going to tolerate that kind of behavior. To allow it to continue for that long, like, you have to, if you're gonna make this is something that I've always been a little peeved. Like, if Tony is like, we're going to be different and we're going to do this thing, and we don't tolerate behavior like this. But we'll tolerate it for a little while, and then when it gets really bad, then we'll
and that's also, but that's also on security of the arena, because security at the arena has the power to throw people out, and they should have. And from what it sounds like, people were getting loud with him and telling him to stop. So I don't know if somebody did that.
There were other rowdy, like she said, that there are other rowdy fans that were supporting her. So
right, and that's a difference. There's a difference between supporting and harassment. And it's not that.
But it's not. It shouldn't be on. Like, listen. I mean, if we are sitting in a wrestling match and we've even been near, I don't know what it is. Bob and I go to wrestling shows. There's almost always a fight breaks out somewhere near us. But we've been to places like, if somebody were doing that to I've actually seen people pull people away from women wrestlers in my local venue, but if we were standing there and someone was doing that, we would have done something. Like, especially Bob, he has a very low tolerance for
and he should, and I appreciate that.
But it shouldn't be. But my whole thing is like, and that's great, but it shouldn't be on us to be the ones that are like trying to. It's like, okay, hey, security, you need to come over here, and like, if we're having an event, I've been rent fairs, I've helped with the pub. If there's a problem, we remove the problem. It's simple.
Right. And, and so Daza says the same thing. He also heard that was a different guy, which makes it worse because there were more guys. And then the USVA guy points out the problem is that they will tolerate. AEW does not enforce their fan code of conduct, but New Japan does enforce theirs. And I've had to remove multiple people from shows. And I appreciate that you do that, because at my own local promotion, when PWX was around, we have had to have things enforced because we were in a small town and they were saying really inappropriate things to talent, to Anthony Henry's wife. We had to tell her that a guy was filming her ass. She had to move to she was working. She had to move to the other. We told her what was happening and moved her around. She had to move to the other side of the ring for the duration of Anthony's match. Then they were saying, because it's a smaller town, they were just making references about trans people. Luckily, our trans friend was not in the audience that night. They did not come to this show. And so we pulled the owner aside, and because he was obviously running around through the show, so we couldn't find him as it was happening. But we talked to him like immediately. We were like, this is not okay. Like, there's got to be a fan conduct thing in place. So for a while they played a video at the beginning of the show that if you are heard by a fan or them or talent or anybody, like, being disrespectful, saying like, they had like their guidelines that they would be kicked out and no refunds would be issued. Right. And so, but we had to be the ones, like our group that was there every single week had to be like, we need to do something like this. There needs to be, you can't just assume that people are gonna behave themselves, especially because this was the first time running in the smaller town. And he was like, well, it's just, that's just kind of how they are. And I was like, sure, but you cannot, but that doesn't give them the right to say the things that they were saying, to do the things that they were doing. They were violating Amber by recording her ass the whole time. Like, she's working, which is my whole point with Skye, which we'll circle back to. But I'm like, it's a problem. And so I appreciate.
But in your case, you're talking about an independent promotion, so they don't have the necessary. I'm not excusing it by any means, but they certainly don't have the resources AEW television has with security. So it should be done. This should be like an instantaneous for a company on the level that has the money and security that they do. Is
you have Cheesecake and Security Sam out there? Why are you not using them?
There for if they're not, and if you don't have a zero tolerance policy for it, people are gonna just keep doing it, because if they're like, okay, well, we're gonna make this obligatory announcement, but not like do anything about it.
Yeah.
Well, great. That's fantastic.
Right. And so that actually goes to, Dawson said, when I go to football, there's an announcement that racist inflammatory comments will lead to people being thrown out. And this needs to be done at the start of wrestling shows from now on. But which the announcement needs to be made, but there has to be follow through. And that comes on they do, but they need to enforce it. And that comes from both the company and it comes from the venue where when these things are happening, because the venue has the ability. All these venues have the ability to throw people out.
Oh, yes. And when I used to go to NFL football games, that's what I was about to say.
When I used to do game days for Panthers games, like they had the ability to throw fans out. We had security. Like there was a place where people, especially if they were drunk and disorderly, they would be taken to a place there was a place for them to go until they can do it. They just have to follow through with it. And so Nikki even points out, this is at our former local promotion, that a guy wouldn't stop talking about a wrestler's breasts, and our friend Kat told him to shut the fuck up, and it hurt his feelings. And he's like, well, I'm gonna go get Brian. And she said, good.
Please do. And then you can explain to him why. This is like with a little kid. It's like, do that so that I can explain, so that we can explain to him why I told you to F off.
Right, exactly. I was like, do it.
Go tell on yourself.
Yes.
You're a genius. Good job.
So Daza said, what makes things worse is the amount of people on social media saying the women have to expect this because of what they wear, which is gobsmacking, which was
correct.
So, and that was my whole, that I almost actually, like, the conversation was happening, and I almost wasn't going to tweet anything to add to the conversation because I had been retweeting people who had pretty much said what I felt. And they had said it and I wasn't going to say anything. And then I just was like, I just made the tweet where I was like, oh, because Nikki said somebody tried to say her gimmick is her ass. First of all, no, it isn't. It is not. That is not Skye Blue's gimmick. Even if it were her gimmick, that does not give you the right to demean her, to degrade her, to say anything vulgar or inappropriate, especially because she was working. You were at her job and saying these things to her. That is not okay. Regardless of what she's wearing, regardless of what her gimmick is. I don't care what her gimmick is. You do not talk to women that way. And so I just sent it off, didn't think anything about it, left the tweet for a couple hours, was doing my job, doing some things, come back, there's 200 likes.
In a real life, in a real world.
Yeah. I come back and
grass, breathing air.
200 likes on it. I was like, where the fuck did this come from? So then later, there's some dudes in my mentions, and one of the guys tried to say something, and he was like, well, it may not be her gimmick, but it's a meme. And I responded, I said, I don't give a fuck if it's a meme. It doesn't give anyone the right to speak to her that way. So then him and this other dude were having a conversation in my mentions, and I thought that I muted them, and I apparently muted the entire thread. And I came back, there were 800 likes on it. I was like, what the hell? So then I just left it muted. And then the last time I checked it was like 2 or 3 days ago, and it was at like 1,000, and it was like 1,100 likes. And I was like, And then, of course, there were most of the people were respectful there, but there were people in the replies and they called me soft. And I told them that sexual harassment is not okay. Hope that helps. And that I just quit responding to most of them, or I block them. The people tried to bring up, well, she's on OnlyFans. Okay, but OnlyFans is her. It's her autonomy. She has the bodily autonomy to post what she wants. That does not give you the right to harass her because of what she wears or what she puts out there. Women are constantly
argument in man logic, in like indoctrinated man logic that is like ever been made is like, it's the question like, well, what were you wearing? Well, that doesn't matter. I mean, that's irrelevant.
But there are women who are dressed completely covered and are still assaulted.
But then you made the point is like, so you want everybody to dress up in the Saudi attire, and that's it.
It's like they don't get. But you don't think that women who are completely covered like that don't get. And this is not at Vinkin, but I mean, but women who are completely dressed like that,
he knows that
they are still assaulted, and they are still. These things are still made to them, and it's not.
The entire thing about the coverage is that literally, I mean, sort of the fundamental idea is that because men can't control themselves, women have to cover themselves all up.
Right.
I mean, that's the sort of the premise of that line of thinking when at the end of the day, like if you're being honest. So there it is right there. The entire thing is it puts all the responsibility on the lady to not be an enticing monster.
Somebody in the replies had made, and I didn't even see it, had made some comment about that. And this other man responded and he said, let me leave this here. And it was a picture of a bear making his point, like, you're the reason that women choose the bear, basically, is what he was getting at.
I like all the people that were reaching out to bears and seeing if they were okay this week.
Yeah, so it's really unfortunate that we're having this conversation in 2024, and it goes back to, again, this bigger conversation of how women are presented in wrestling, obviously in other forms of media, just in general, living their day-to-day lives as well, but particularly in this specific conversation in the wrestling industry. And part of it is because of how women have been portrayed on TV and how some men have grown up thinking that women who expose any type of their body deserve to be shamed. I think that if I find a woman attractive, then I can say these things to her because she'll enjoy it. And there's a difference between a compliment and harassment. And I don't see why people think that there's not a very big, there's a big difference between a compliment and being sexually harassed.